Good morning. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. I hope you have a great time in Las Vegas and at this financial brand event. It's always a pleasure to speak here, and look at this crowd. And this is such a great venue. It's got a great staff. It's got great AV. Such a pleasure. So, and I see you're all taking pictures already. I had breakfast with some of you today. Thank you for sharing your table. I just love speaking. So I'm going to give you a talk today about what I learned working for Steve Jobs. This is a picture of him. I worked at Apple from 1983 to 1987, and then 1995 to 1997. And it was a real adventure. A lot of people have said that Steve was a difficult person to work for. He was arrogant, temperamental. All of that is true, actually. He was a very difficult person to work for. And yet, I will tell you that without his influence on my life, I would not be here today. I certainly would not have accomplished as much as I've accomplished in my life. And I look back as I was honored to work for him. You know how you look back sometimes in your life, and while you're in school or you're in a job, you think, oh, you want the easiest boss and the easiest teacher, right? The ones that doesn't push you, doesn't hold you to higher standards. But then when you look back, and it may take 20 years of looking back, you realize that the best teacher and the best boss were the ones that pushed you and were the toughest. And that is definitely the case with Steve Jobs. I think the world is a lot more boring without Steve Jobs in changing the world and making a dent in the universe. Having said that, I can pretty much guarantee you that he is telling God what to do right now. And I'm sure he's telling God how to make Universe 2.0. And if you don't like Universe 1.0, stick around because Universe 2.0 is coming. If Steve is involved, I can guarantee you that it will be late. None of your cables from this universe will work in the next universe. And the next universe is going to be great, but it ends at 2 p.m. every day when the battery runs out. Yeah, he was a very, very special person. So these are the lessons that I learned from Steve. I hope you can apply these lessons to your businesses. All of you are marketeers, I take it. And he was fundamentally a marketing-driven company, a marketing-driven person. Back then, in the company when I first worked for Apple was divided into two large pieces. There was the Macintosh division. This is around 1983, and the Macintosh division was still trying to finish Macintosh. So it was spending all the money. It had no revenue. And the Apple II division was making all the money because it was shipping. But we were such bad people. Honestly, we did not let Apple II division employees into the Macintosh division building. If you think about that, that is rather bizarre because they were not allowed into the building they paid for. And so they came up with a great joke about us, which is, how many Macintosh division employees does it take to screw in a light bulb? The answer is 1. The Macintosh division employee holds up the light bulb and expects the universe to revolve around him. How many of you use Windows? You can hold your hands up high. I'm not going to shoot you. So the Microsoft version of this joke is, how many Microsoft employees does it take to screw in a light bulb? And the answer is none, because Bill Gates has declared darkness the new standard. So I have watched high-tech speakers for about 30 years, and I think there are two key salient points about most high-tech speakers. First, they almost all suck. And second, they go long. And that is a bad combination. If you suck and you're short, it's okay. And if you're great and you're long, it's also okay. But if you suck and go long, that's like being stupid and arrogant. And so what I always do is I use a top 10 format so that in case you think I suck, you know about how much longer I'll suck. I have 10 key points for you. So these are the 10 things that I learned from Steve. Oh, I know, everybody, whenever people find out that I work for Apple and Steve, they always want a Steve Jobs story. So my favorite Steve Jobs story is that one day, I'm in my cubicle, and he shows up with someone I'd never met before, and he asked me, well, what do you think of this company called Noware Guy, Knoware? It was an educational software company, knowledge software. So I said, Steve, the company's kind of mediocre product doesn't really take advantage of the Macintosh color and graphics, WYSIWYG display, it's drill and practice, 2 + 2 = 4, right or wrong. So it's not strategic for us, Steve. And then he says, I want you to meet the CEO of Noware. So, welcome to my life. That's what it was like. You had to prove yourself every day. And actually, with hindsight, that was the right answer, because if I told him that was a great piece of software, he probably knew it was crap, and then that would have limited my career, if not ended my career. That was what it was like. So these are the lessons of Steve Jobs, okay? So, picture of the division. I want to show you something. This division, I think, was the largest collection of egomaniacs in Silicon Valley, really. But although Facebook recently broke that record, but I'm gonna show you. Difference is we didn't give away any of your privacy. But anyway, so the most important person in this picture. This is a picture from 1984, and this is the building we would not let Apple II division employees into. But the most significant fact, oh, by the way, I'm in the upper left-hand corner. You cannot see me. I'm so stupid. I should have stood in the front of this picture. Had I known that the division and the company would become so important and so valuable, I would have stood in the front. But the person in the front is Steve Jobs. He's kneeling, holding a Mac 128K. And this is the only known instance of Steve Jobs ever getting on his knees for anything. So this is a historical photo. The first thing, Steve in this was way ahead of his time. And at the time, I did not realize how ahead of his time Steve was, because Steve did not care about race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, educational background, anything like that. He did not care at all. The world was very simple for Steve. You were either great or you were crap. It didn't matter if you were great and male, female, Christian, Muslim, Buddhist. It didn't matter. You were either great or crap. I'll show you a picture. This is a panel that happened about 2 years ago. And these were the direct reports of Steve. The woman on the left is the moderator, Katie Hafner from the New York Times. The woman next to her is Joanna Hoffman, who ran marketing. The woman next to her is Debbie Coleman, who ran production in the factory. And next to her is Susan Barnes, the CFO. Next to her is Barbara Koken, ran marketing. And next to her, product marketing. And next to her is Andy Cunningham, who ran PR. And so what I'm trying to illustrate here is that these were all direct reports to Steve. So Steve had mostly women direct reports way before anybody else was thinking like that, because he literally did not care about gender. The woman in green, very good story about her that illustrates this concept. So Steve took her to Japan to negotiate with Sony to put the Sony disk drive in the first Macintosh. And the executives at Sony told Steve that they would not negotiate with a woman. And Steve told the executives of Sony, well, if you don't negotiate with Susan, we will not use your drive. It was that simple. And I think this is a great illustration. And at the time, I did not realize, because this was really the first time I worked in a large company, I did not realize how ahead of his time Steve was in this. He was completely blind to all this other stuff except great or crap. That's all he cared about. Next thing I learned from Steve is that, contrary to all the marketing you may hear and all the theories you may hear, Steve believed that customers can't tell you what they need. They can tell you how to evolve what they already got from you. They could tell you how to make a better, faster, cheaper Apple I, better, faster, cheaper Apple II, but they cannot tell you how to get to the revolution and to the true innovation. Back then, this was the state of the art. This is from Xerox PARC. So this is the precursor of Macintosh. Mouse, graphic user interface, all the good stuff. It was done at Xerox PARC. Now, there's two ways of interpreting this portion of history. One is that Apple went over to PARC and stole all the good ideas. The other is that you got to know what to steal. That's my theory. Because you can break into a house and steal the pillows and the paper towels and the toilet paper, or you can break into a house and steal the cameras and the TVs. You got to know what to steal. This was the state of the art. Xerox PARC did not know what it had because they asked people, employees, what do you think of this? And all they could think about was in terms of IT professionals. They could not think of the larger market of knowledge workers, people like you and I who are not IT professionals. So they wanted a better, faster, cheaper Apple II. And Macintosh is many things, but it was never a better, faster, cheaper Apple II. This was completely the next curve. And I learned this very valuable lesson, that if we had gone to all the people who own this and said, what should we make next? It would be better, faster, cheaper Apple II. So the lesson here I think you need to internalize is you can't necessarily go to your current customer and ask them, well, what do you want out of our bank? How can we make our bank better? How can we make our credit union better? Because they can only define what they want better or changed in terms of what they already know. So if you had asked the person before the internet about banking, they might say, well, we need more teller lines, or we need extended hours. They would not have told you to build an internet-based smartphone app, never have to show up, take a picture of the front and the back of the check and deposit it without mailing in the check. They couldn't embrace that because they were so used to standing in line at a brick and mortar facility. So the lesson is, customers cannot necessarily tell you how to truly innovate. For Apple, honestly, the market research, air quotes, the market research was the fact that the left hemisphere of Steve Jobs' brain was connected to the right hemisphere of Steve Jobs' brain. That was the focus group. So there's two interpretations of what Steve did. He either knew what people would come to need, or he built whatever the hell he wanted and convinced people they wanted it too. I subscribe to the second theory, okay? Sort of the Elon Musk effect. You build and you hope they come. The third thing, which is the next step in realizing, well, if you can't ask your customers, what do? You have to realize that true innovation happens on the next curve, not the curve you're on, not a better brick and mortar branch. And so let's look at a very old example. This is ice. Ice 1.0 was the ice harvester. This is late 1800s, early 1900s. Around 1900s, 9 million pounds of ice was harvested. So this meant that in the winter, in a cold city, with a horse and a sleigh and a saw, you cut blocks of ice. And then you sold those blocks of ice to your local neighbors, right? 30 years go by, now we have Ice 2.0. This is the ice factory. Now think about this. This is a much better way to get ice because it doesn't have to be a cold city. It doesn't have to be a cold time of year. You can freeze water in Las Vegas any time of year. You can't harvest ice in Las Vegas actually any time of year either. Ice factory. Another 30 years go by, and now we have the refrigerator curve. The refrigerator curve is even better because now you're not dependent on being close to an ice factory where the ice man can deliver ice in the ice truck. Everybody can have an ice factory. You could have a personal ice factory, a PC, if you will, a personal chiller. So now, look at the curves in ice. Imagine you were a successful ice harvester and you found out there was an ice factory. Your reaction may be, what do we need an ice factory for? We just go out in the winter with our saw, our sleigh, our horse. the lake is frozen, we cut blocks of ice. Why do we need to build a factory? Imagine you're a successful ice factory owner, and you say, well, why would people want a refrigerator? They don't want to freeze water. They don't want refrigeration in their own house. They can just send a telegraph to us, and we'll drive over a block of ice with our horse. Usually, the people who are successful on one curve are resistant to the next curve. And it's because people define themselves in terms of what they already do. If you define yourself as we harvest blocks of ice, you don't embrace the factory. If you define yourself as we freeze water centrally and deliver it, you don't embrace the refrigerator. And this is my cautionary tale to you. Be careful how you define yourself. Because the harvester, the refrigerator, the factory, we're all in the same business. It was about cleanliness and convenience. Ice and refrigeration makes people's lives more convenient. Their food is cleaner. That's the business they're in. And so it should not matter if you cut blocks of ice from a lake, you freeze blocks of ice in a factory, or you build refrigerators. Focus on what you do. If you define yourself as we provide financial peace of mind, does it matter whether it's a brick and mortar, whether it's an app, whether it's a currency, but get to the next curve. Another example, more digital. Map 1.0, paper maps. Great stuff, great stuff. Beats the hell out of, trying to divine the trail or something like that. So this is the Silicon Valley map, and it shows that how I would go from my house, which is in the Menlo Park area, to Santa Cruz, where I like to surf. So I go 280 to 85 to 17 to 1. Okay? That's the paper map. Now, it got better with digital map. Now it shows the 280 to 85 to 17 to 1. This is map 2.0, much better than a paper map. You could revise this map. It's handy on your phone. But then what really makes a difference is map 3.0, because this is now crowdsourced traffic information. And so you see that red area on the right side? So this Waze app is telling me, guy, I know you're used to going 85 to 17, but 17 is red. All the other Waze customers are stuck there. So you need to go 85 to Winchester to Los Gatos, Saratoga Road to 17 and go around that. That's map 3.0. Map 1.0 is paper. Map 2.0 is digital. Map 3.0 was or is crowdsourced information. And if you think about it, all these maps have the same function. It's getting you to the place as quickly as possible. We went from paper to digital to crowdsourced. Get to the next curve. And this is the slide that I call the slide of death. The slide of death is when you incorrectly define what you do. Let's say that you're Kodak and you believe you're a chemical company. You put chemicals on film. Let's say you're Polaroid and you define yourself as a chemical company. You put chemicals on paper. Let's say you're Wang and you define yourself as making word processors. Or you're Smith Corona and you define yourself as we make mechanical gizmos called typewriters that have a bunch of arms that swing back and forth and hit the paper and come back. Well, Kodak and Polaroid. How many of you use a Kodak or Polaroid camera today? Yeah, 0 of you. And if you think about it, though, Kodak and Polaroid were not chemical companies. The business they were in was preserving memories, right? So if you preserve a memory with chemicals on film, okay. If you preserve memories with chemicals on paper, also okay. But you're in the preservation of memories business. And so if you could preserve a memory with a sensor in a camera phone or a digital SLR, so much the better. You're not in the business of chemicals on paper or chemicals on film. You're in the business of preserving memories. So when you see digital photography invented, you should jump to the next curve. The irony of all of this is you could make the argument that Kodak, in fact, invented digital cameras. But they never seized the day, just like Xerox PARC never seized the day with the Macintosh graphical user interface. When you look back, it's easy to condemn them for doing something so stupid, but I'm telling you, when you're in the middle of it, if you think about it, suppose you're Kodak and you're selling as much film as you can make, and some geek says, oh, I got this new thing that eliminates film. Like, what would you say to that person? Yeah, why don't you just eliminate our entire business? The sales force is not asking for the reduction of our business. Our customers are not saying, well, throw out all our development. The drugstores aren't calling us up saying, please eliminate our business where people drop off rolls of film. Nobody's asking for it. That's the problem. Getting to the next curve. If you define yourself as Wang, as we make dedicated word processors, Smith Corona, dedicated typewriters, but really, what business were they in? They were in the business of communicating information. So if you define yourself as we communicate information, maybe you broaden from just word processing. Maybe you go from typewriter, mechanical device, to computer, digital device. This is the key message. You need to get to or create the next curve. Number four, Steve really taught me that design counts. It may not count for everybody, but it counts for enough people. So this is a picture of a MacBook Air, right? So a MacBook Air is this beautiful, thin piece of artistic sculpture. It looks like a Tibetan monk made it by chanting. You know what I'm saying? Like many of you use this big, thick, black, ugly plastic laptop, right? And I refuse to believe that you voluntarily used that. I think you were coerced into using that. Because I don't think that you would wake up in the morning saying, today is laptop day, I'm going to buy a laptop. I can buy the beautiful aluminum, machine, awesome, thin thing, or the thick, black, ugly plastic thing. I'll go buy the thick, black, ugly plastic thing. I know you're cursed. I forgive you for that. But Steve truly understood design. One of the most frustrating things for me is I'm in Silicon Valley, and I see companies with infinite money. And so they have infinite money, but zero taste. And I cannot understand, they should at least understand, who to copy, right? Like if you have infinite money, Jonathan Ive, who's the lead designer for Apple, he's not the only person in the world who can make cool stuff. So if you have infinite money, why don't you make cool stuff too? You make ugly stuff. I don't understand that. So it's not a matter of resources, it's a matter of taste. Steve taught me design truly matters. It truly matters what your smartphone app looks like. It's not just the functionality. I use a smartphone app for the bank that I work with, and I have to tell you that I have problems navigating this smartphone app. And it's as if the people who designed it never used a smartphone app to do banking. And the most common thing you do, which for me is taking pictures of checks and depositing them, is hidden like 3 menus down. And then, there's a menu that says money transfer, and then there's like external money transfer, internal money transfer, pop money transfer. There's like 5 ways. Like, which one is it? There's like domestic wire, international wire. Okay, so I don't want to turn this into a bitch session, but so it allows me to take a picture of the front and the back of the check, okay, to deposit. I don't have to mail it in or all that, or I have to take it in. I love that. But you know what? So I'm on my iPhone. I take a picture of the front and the back. I deposit it. And that picture doesn't go into my photo album. It goes only to the bank. Now, maybe there's some kind of security reason why that's true, but I tell you, many, many times, I look at a statement and it says, you deposited $565. I knew I deposited it digitally using the picture, but now that picture is gone. I'd have to go to the website, scroll through all the stuff, find that check, and then click and hope the image is there. I took a picture. Why isn't that picture in my album? So for all of you who have smartphone apps, who enable people to take a picture of a check to deposit it, please make your software put the picture into the album so that the picture of the check is always available. You don't have to go to the statement. Is there a legal reason why you can't put the picture in the album? No? Please do that. I don't want to name names because I don't want to get in trouble, but please do that. Now, where was I? Okay, number 5. Number 5, what I learned from Steve is, don't worry, be crappy. Great Bobby McFerrin song, don't worry, be happy. But what innovators do is, don't worry, be crappy. Let me show you a piece of crap. This is a piece of crap. This is a Macintosh 128K. Introduced January 24th, 1984. Okay, let's look at the technical specs of this. It has 128K of RAM. 128K. And I have to tell you, if you have this impression of Apple that we were sitting around in beanbag chairs drinking white wine in our Birkenstock smoking dope, it's pretty accurate, actually. So like, I look back and I say, like, how could we have possibly believed that 128K of memory was a big deal? And then we had a 140K floppy drive. Now, excuse me, a 400K floppy drive, which is 3x the standard floppy drive. We thought, what are people going to do with such big floppy drives? And secretly, we were working on a, get this, 5 megabyte hard disk. I kid you not. We were working on a secret 5 megabyte hard disk, and we were asking ourselves, what are people going to do with all that storage? My God, 5 megabytes. So this computer had a 400K floppy drive, 128K of RAM. Thanks to my efforts, there was no software. Slow network. It was a piece of crap, but it was a revolutionary piece of crap. So I'm not saying the first refrigerator was great, the first ice factory was great. I'm not saying the first telephone was great, but it was better than what came before already. And the lesson that I learned is, don't worry, be crappy. The way we work in Silicon Valley is we ship and then we test. Just FYI. Except biotech, I hope. So ship then test. Now, obviously you're in a highly regulated business, but I'm telling you, keep this attitude in mind that, you know, if you wait for the perfect app, for the perfect technology, you will never ship. The world will pass you by. Don't worry, be crappy. If you want a more formal way of saying this, there's the concept of the MVP, the minimum viable product. This is MVP, except don't worry, be crappy is a much funnier way to remember that. But don't worry, be crappy. This computer, you know, Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, has a great saying that if you look back on version 1 of your product, your smartphone app, your website, whatever it is, and if you don't cringe, it means that you shipped too late. By definition, I look at this and I cringe. I mean, 128K, no software, little monitor, only black and white. I cringe. I look back on my first book. My first book was called The Macintosh Way, and I am embarrassed by that book. And so I guess another way of looking at it is ship cringe-worthy stuff. Because if you're not cringing, you're not being innovative enough. Okay? Don't worry. Be crappy. Number 6. Number 6 I learned from Steve is to aim high. When he recruited us, it was not a matter of, well, let's ship another personal computer. There's the Apple 1 and 2, there's the IBM PC, VIC-20, Commodore 64, there's Atari. Why don't we ship another personal computer? It was never positioned that way. It was always about preventing the end of freedom. It was to prevent a totalitarian world. It was to prevent IBM from screwing with our minds. And the ad that ran was this ad where this woman ran down the center of this auditorium and threw this axe into this image of this totalitarian 1984 George Orwell figure. So when we woke up every morning, it wasn't about shipping a personal computer. It was about preventing the end of freedom. That's what we were trying to do. So I suggest to you, as you try to innovate, as you try to change the world, aim high. It is about peace of mind. It is about financial security. It's that kind of worthy goal to prevent the end of freedom. That was our goal. Number 7. Number 7 lesson I learned from Steve is less is more. And this had to do with everything, especially design. If you look at Steve's slides, for example, this is a Steve Jobs slide. Let us deconstruct this slide. There is a huge graphic. Ironic, it is the Windows logo. Huge graphic. That word iTunes, that's about a 200-point font. The best Windows app ever written, those 6 words, 90-point font. So I learned from Steve that the bigger the font, the better the speaker. So one thing I want you to all go home and change your PowerPoint. Make the biggest font you can. I'm telling you. The minimum font size should be 30 points. Okay, minimum. I have a theory. It's the Guy Kawasaki PowerPoint rule, 10, 20, 30. 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. A very good rule of thumb for your font size is figure out who the oldest person is in her audience, divide his or her age by 2. So you're talking to 60-year-old people, 30 points. 50-year-old people, 25 points. Someday you may be pitching a 16-year-old, God bless you, 8-point that day, okay? But until that day, 10 slides, 20 minutes, 30-point font. Also, I'll give you another Steve Jobs tip. Make your background black, or at least dark. Because I think when you look at a presentation with a dark background or a blue background, this kind of thing, it shows gravitas. It shows seriousness. It's easier to read. If you use a white background, so it's black text on white background, it says that you booted PowerPoint and you started typing. If you use a dark background, it shows that you are a PowerPoint ninja master. And you went to the PowerPoint master page and you created a black background and you picked this big, thick, sans serif font that's easy to read from 1,000 yards because you know what the hell you're doing. I'm telling you, black is the new black. So I'll tell you a funny story. So one day, I meet with this entrepreneur, and it's after he gave a pitch that morning. And he says to me, you know, Guy, I have about 3 hours before my next pitch. Do you have any tips for me? Can I make my presentation better? And he was a black entrepreneur from Georgia. And so I said to him, is your background black? I said, yeah, I told you, I'm from Georgia, from a multicultural family. I said, no, I can see you're black. Is your background black? Anyway, make your background black. So this is a Steve Jobs slide, okay? 200 points and 90 points. One big graphic. The reason why Steve did it this way is because he basically said, today we're introducing iTunes. This is the best Windows app ever. And then he starts talking about the app. So it takes you about 3 seconds to read all the text on the thing, and then guess what? You're looking back at him. He wants you looking at him, not the slide. I'll show you a contrast. This is a Bill Gates slide. Now you tell me, where the hell should you start reading that thing? Okay? Like, what is the focal point there? You tell me. I'll give you 5 or 10 minutes. It's okay. Now, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were both enormously successful people. So I'm not telling you that you can't have slides like this and succeed. You obviously can. But why make it harder on yourself? I think you can go back. This versus this. Wow. So That's the lesson. I want you to imprint these 2 slides in your brain. So the next time you make slides, you think, who am I going to be? Bill Gates or Steve Jobs? Bill Gates or Steve Jobs? Again, both billionaires. I hope you become a billionaire. If you, quite frankly, if you're a billionaire, nobody cares what your slides look like, okay? But the question is, which came first, the crappy slides or the billions, okay? So I think you should have slides that look like this, not like this, okay? Design counts. Less is more. Number 8. Number 8 I learned from Steve, and you might be shocked to think that I learned this from Steve of all people in the world, because you think Steve is headstrong, arrogant, always has to have his way. You'd probably be right. But I think Steve showed me several times that changing your mind is not a sign of stupidity. It's not a sign of making a mistake. It's not a sign of being a coward. It's not a sign of anything negative like that. It shows that you are intelligent, that you realize when you made a mistake. I'll show you this. Our innovative approach, using Web 2.0 based standards, lets developers create amazing new applications while keeping the iPhone secure and reliable. Let me translate what he's saying. He's saying that the iPhone version 1 is closed. You cannot write apps for it. The only way you could add functionality to an iPhone is Safari plugins. That's the Web 2.0 based standard line. So when the iPhone was announced as a closed system, all the experts, all the analysts, all the journalists said, you know, Steve, we're not worthy. We're not worthy. Thank you for keeping our phone secure and reliable. A year goes by. Apple executives to showcase Mac OS X Leopard and OS X iPhone development platforms at WWDC 2008 keynote. Let me translate this for you. This is saying exactly the opposite. We are opening up the iPhone. You can write any kind of app that you want. This is a 180-degree reversal. You know the analysts and experts who a year earlier said, thank you, Steve, you are so great. You kept it closed and secure. This time they said, oh, thank you, Steve, you are so right. You made it open and flexible, and now we can have 1,000 flowers blooming. And I learned this very valuable lesson. This is, talk about a reversal. I mean, how many companies, how many people would have the courage to say, we were completely, utterly wrong with having a closed architecture. We have completely, utterly opened it up a year later. Changing your mind is a sign of intelligence. Number 9. Number 9, and take it from a marketer, okay? I think this one slide is all you need to understand all of marketing. Now, you may be working with some highfalutin consulting firms, and they may charge you $5 million for what I'm going to tell you right now, okay? In a 2x2 matrix, you want to be in the upper right-hand corner. Write that down, okay? So, this is a 2x... Oh, some of you have worked with these firms. This is a 2x2 matrix. The bottom right corner is where you have something that's useful and valuable, but it is not unique. If you are Michael Dell and you slap the same operating system on the same hardware, you can make a lot of money, but you always have to compete on price. It's always about margin. It can be done, but it's always competitive about margin. And there are many things that Apple competes on, but it is not price. The upper left-hand corner is a corner where you have created something truly unique. Only you do this. You are the only company, the only bank, the only credit union in the world that does this. But it is of no value. In that corner, you are just plain stupid. You own a market that doesn't exist. The bottom left corner is even worse. In that corner, you have something that's not valuable, and there are other stupid companies doing the same stupid thing. So let me explain a great example from the dot-com days. In the dot-com days, there was a company called Pets.com. Pets.com was selling dog food online. Basically, dead cows in cans. That was their product. And so the pitch for that company, let me give you a little slice of life of Silicon Valley. The pitch for that company was that there are 300 million Americans. 1 in 4 owns a dog. That's 75 million dogs. Each dog eats 2 cans of dog food per day. 150 million cans of dog food per day. And unlike a B2B business, this was a B2C business. Actually, it was a B2D business. Dogs eat every day of the year. So you take 150 million cans of dog food per day times 365, we're talking billions of cans of dog food. And so with my rock star co-founder, how hard could it be to get 1% of 150 million cans of dog food per day? That's 1.5 million cans of dog food per day. Conservatively speaking, first year, worst case results, 1.5 million cans of dog food per day. So that's why there was Pets.com, MyPets.com, PeapodPets.com, LastMinutePets.com, DiscountPets.com. Because there were so many dogs eating so many cans of dog food that venture capitalists in Silicon Valley wanted, everybody wanted the ability to sell dog food online in their portfolio. Now, why was it not valuable? It's because of this. The dog food business is a very simple business. You have a dog and you have a cow. You need to kill the cow, put it in a can, get it to the dog. You know? Not a lot of regulation of this. And so the thinking was that why is there this thing in the middle called a dog food store? Do people want to get in their cars? Do they want to drive to it? Do they want to find parking? Do they want to go in the store and perform an intelligent consumer purchase decision? Are they tasting the food, for crying out loud? It's pieces of cows in cans. So we're going to eliminate the dog food store. This means that you can discount dog food 20% at the top of the invoice. But now, the dog food, the dead cow in the can, is still in your factory. You have to get it to the dog. So now you have to ship it and handle it. So you discounted it at the top, but you added back shipping and handling at the bottom. So effectively, you didn't save a lot of money. Discount for no retailer, add back for shipping and handling. And then if you think about it, now it was about the same price and it was less convenient because somebody had to be at home when UPS dropped off the dead cow in the can. Otherwise, you came home and there's a little tag that said, "We tried to drop off a dead cow in a can today. No one was home. We're going to bring the dead cow in the can back tomorrow. If you're not here tomorrow, we're going to send the dead cow in the can back to the factory." Okay? So it was less convenient, just as expensive. So it was not unique and not valuable. So I think all of marketing boils down to this corner. In this corner, the upper right-hand corner, McKinsey-esque, this corner is where marketing is made, margin is made, money is made, history is made. You dent the universe, you change the world. Because when you have something unique and valuable, when you have the first way you can easily navigate your music and legally and inexpensively buy music from the largest publishers, you have iPod. It is unique and valuable. Other examples of uniqueness and value. This is a Breitling emergency watch. When you unscrew the big knob at the 5 o'clock position, an antenna comes out. That antenna broadcasts an emergency signal. That emergency signal is seen by airplanes. The airplanes say, somebody has crashed. There's an emergency. Call the Coast Guard. Get Kevin Costner into the helicopter. Drop him in the wire basket. Rescue the person. Okay? So this watch can save your life. This is not something you do. I took the wrong exit off Las Vegas Boulevard. Pull the watch out. This is when you're about to die. When you're about to die, this watch will save your life. That is a unique and valuable watch. This is a smart car. So all of us have cars that can park parallel to the curb. You could have a Suburban that parks parallel to the curb if you have enough parking. How many of you have a car that can park perpendicular to the curb? That is unique. Well, another thing, I'm a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador. So I have to disclose that when I tell you this story. By the way, being a Mercedes-Benz brand ambassador, that is what you call a 1% problem. Okay, that is, I'm essentially paid to drive a Mercedes. This is, somebody has to do it. So, there is a program in Germany where DHL has a smartphone app that shows where the recipient's smart car is. So rather than DHL taking the dead cow in the can to your house and leaving a tag, it shows the DHL driver where your car is, the app then unlocks your car so he can put the dead cow in the can into your car. Now think about that. So, you know, I would be perfectly comfortable with letting someone put packages in my car. Not so much my house, but my car. So that's good for me. No more tags, no more I gotta be home tomorrow so that when the dead cow in the can comes for the last time, I'm home. I think it's also good for the environment, that it's good for society, because now DHL could come to a company parking lot and there may be 20 cars where he's dropping off dead cows in cans. So you can make 20 deliveries in a parking lot because there's 20 cars there for the recipients, as opposed to going to 20 homes, leaving 18 tags saying I'm coming back tomorrow. A unique and valuable proposition. So I think, honestly, all of marketing boils down to this. How is your financial institution unique and valuable? I don't know how that can be true for each one of you, but that's the goal. Make your company unique and valuable. As marketers, your responsibility is to take that reality and make sure people understand that it is unique and viable. Why is it unique and valuable? That is the key to all of marketing, and I learned this from Steve Jobs. Macintosh was unique and valuable. It was the only personal computer that anyone could use. It was unique and valuable. Number 10. Number 10 is that innovators ignore naysayers. Naysayers, bozos, stupid, negative people. You have to learn to ignore them. There are two kinds of bozos in the world, okay? One bozo, slovenly, disgusting, pocket protector, body odor, Japanese watch, rusty car. And you look at that person and you say, wow, you're a loser. That's not the dangerous bozo, because only a loser would listen to a loser. The dangerous bozo is the winner bozo. The winner bozo dresses in all black. The winner bozo owns stuff that ends in I, like Armani, Lamborghini, Maserati, Ferrari. The winner bozo is rich and famous. And I think many people assume that rich and famous equals smart. Rich and famous often equals lucky, not smart. If rich and famous equals smart, we would listen to Kanye West about how to raise a family. We would listen to Tom Cruise about how to pick a religion. It would be a different world, okay? So just be cautionary. Rich and famous doesn't always equal smart. But you're often tempted to listen to rich and famous people when they have an opinion of what you're trying to do. So I think that bozosity is like the flu. And how do you fight the flu? You fight the flu by getting a little bit of bozosity so that when you encounter big bozosity, you've built up resistance. So I'm going to expose you to bozosity right now so you can remember that you were in Las Vegas at the Financial Brand Summit and Forum, and you were exposed to this bozosity, so it doesn't affect you anymore, okay? So, I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers. Thomas Watson, chairman IBM. Thomas Watson predicted there would be 5 computers in the world. Basically, I have all 5 computers in my house right now, Macintoshes. This telephone has too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication. The device is inherently of no value to us. Western Union internal memo, 1876. 1876, Western Union wrote off telephony. OMG, LOL. I mean, what was the plan in 1877? Let's teach Americans the Morse code. How hard could that be? Then we're going to put a telegraph in every house. And as more and more Americans buy horse-driven carts, we'll have a long bale of copper wire available for every telegraph, and they can spool that telegraph behind their carts. That's our mobile telephony solution. So, this is a very good example. So successful in telegraphs, didn't embrace the next curve. You own all the ice factories, maybe you don't embrace refrigerators. If you make film, maybe you don't embrace digital photography. If you make a lot of typewriters, you don't embrace computers. Duh. This is dangerous bozosity. There's no reason why anyone would want a computer in their home. Ken Olsen, founder of DEC. He was a fantastic innovator, fantastic entrepreneur, changed the world, took us from mainframes to mini computers. But he was so successful with mini computers, he could not embrace personal computers. Now, put yourself in the place of a tech entrepreneur. Let's say you're Stephen Woz, and everybody's telling you, Stephen Woz, you're building a computer company. You need to get some adult supervision. You need to have somebody as an advisor, investor, director, someone who's been there and done that, someone like Ken Olsen. Why don't you ask Ken Olsen to invest, to be an advisor, be a director? Let's say you happen to find Ken Olsen. You get in an elevator, and there he is, Mr. Olsen. And you say to Mr. Olsen, you know, Mr. Olsen, we have a different vision of computing. We think computers could be small and cheap and easy to use. So small, so cheap, so easy to use, Mr. Olsen. You could have a computer in your house, Mr. Olsen. And Mr. Olsen says, son, there is no reason why anyone would want a computer in their house. If they want to balance their checkbook, they can come back to the office and use Quicken running on a DEC mini computer. So before you ruin your life, learn COBOL and Fortran and come work for me. And there would be no Apple. This is dangerous velocity, because if you think about it, one of the most logical people to advise a company like Apple would be a person like Ken Olsen, who created DEC. This is dangerous velocity. Don't let the bozos grind you down. And I have to tell you my own bozo story. I tell this at the end of my presentations because I don't like to impugn my intelligence at the beginning of the speech and have to dig myself out of a hole. So, about 16 years ago, I get a call from Michael Moritz of Sequoia Capital. Sequoia Capital has generated companies that exceed $1 trillion in valuation, okay? So he calls me up, and he says, Guy, would you like to interview for CEO position of a company I just funded? And I asked about the company. He told me who it was. I did a little research online. And I said, you know, Mike, my wife and I have one child. We have a son already. He's 2 years old. And my wife is in beta with our second child. And so, Mike, the location of this company is about an hour from our house. So it would mean 2 hours of driving every day. I just cannot drive 2 hours every day. And I don't see how it can be a business because it doesn't have any patent-pending, curve-jumping, paradigm-shifting technology. It doesn't have a real solid business model. It doesn't have a world-class team. I just don't see it, Mike, so I don't even want to interview for the position of CEO. Okay, so let's say that I did interview. I would have gotten the job, because when the director or board member of the company and the person who funded the company calls you up and asks you want to be the CEO, that person has made a decision already. And that person's not going to like call up 100 people and say, well, will you submit to our extensive 10-interview process? That person calls you up and says, you want to interview? It's because they're willing to offer you the job. So I would have gotten the job. Now, how much would I have gotten of that company? Well, I should tell you the company. The company was Yahoo. So now Yahoo is in some difficult times now, but this would be the first CEO of Yahoo, right? So let's say I took the interview. Let's say I got the job. How much of Yahoo would I have gotten? I would say 4%. Why so much? Well, I would be the first adult there, so 4%. Now, the way it works with stock options in Silicon Valley is you vest 1/4 per year for 4 years. So every month I would get 1/48 of 4% of Yahoo. Now, let's be conservative. Let's say that 2 years into a 4-year vesting schedule, I Peter Principle out. I hit the height of my incompetence. And there's this emergency board meeting, and they say, you know, Guy, we need someone who can take Yahoo to the next level, someone who can stand toe-to-toe with Barry Diller, Rupert Murdoch, Steve Jobs, Steve Case, Steve Ballmer. Stand toe-to-toe with the moguls. And we don't think you're that person, so we're firing you as of the end of today. And I would have said, listen, guys, time out here. You may not have noticed, but I am Asian American. And as an Asian American, you cannot fire me. There's this thing called wrongful termination. And so if you fire me today, tomorrow there'll be a lawsuit on your desk, wrongful termination. And then turn your TV to CNN. Because live from in front of Yahoo's headquarters, there will be 60 old Japanese ladies protesting the wrongful termination of one of their own. Now, let's say you are so stupid as to proceed to go to court. In court, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, you know what? There's a pattern of discrimination against Asian Americans, in particular Japanese Americans. Because in World War II, when America was fighting Italy and Germany and Japan, which countries' former citizens were put in internment camps? Did you put the Italian Americans into internment camps? No. German Americans? No. Japanese Americans? Yes. You took all of us from our farms and our stores and you stuck us in these internment camps in the middle of deserts. Data point number one. Data point number two, at the end of World War II, which country did you drop 2 atomic weapons on? Japan. Data point number 2. Data point number 3, you're firing me. I see a pattern here. And they would have said, you know, guy, time out, keep calm. What would it take for you to go away quietly? I said, listen, if you don't want me, I don't want to be here. Okay, so I'm out. I'll sign a non-disparagement, non-compete, anything you want. Just accelerate my vesting. You've already budgeted 4%. I've earned 2. Give me the other 2. I'll go away happy. I'll disappear into the sunset. And they would have said yes. So by my calculation, my refusal to even take an interview cost me roughly $2 billion. Now, you're all in the banking business, so $2 billion is chump change to you, okay? But for most people, $2 billion here, $2 billion there, it adds up. And so I've been thinking about this for 16 years, 7 weeks, 6 days, 8 hours and 55 minutes, roughly. And I've come to this conclusion. For the love of my wife, to be there as my 4 children were growing up, I made the right decision. I picked my family over money. That's what I did. Clap. That's right. $2 billion worth of applause. Here's the problem with that line of reasoning. I believe that for my family, that heartfelt sentiment that you heard, kind of like Paul Ryan wanted to spend more time with his kids. So with that heartfelt sentiment, I believe it explains 1 billion. And from the bottom of my heart, I tell you, it's the 2nd billion that pisses me off. Because the 2nd billion shows that I too was a bozo. I was so stupid because I could not understand that this wasn't an extension of the personal computer business. This was a whole new curve. I thought that the internet was nothing more than what was coming through the Macintosh modem cable. Little did I know it was the whole new world. I too was a bozo. Don't let the bozos grind you down. And number 11 truly personifies Steve, which is, you know, where most people might believe that you need to see something to believe it, Steve believed the opposite, which is if you believe it, then you'll see it. So if you believe in Macintosh, evangelism comes from Greek words meaning bringing the good news. And so we brought the good news of Macintosh. And Macintosh would make you more creative and more productive. It wasn't merely a personal computing. It was to increase your creativity and productivity. And if you believe it, you'll see it. And I have to tell you, I'm guilty of this as anybody because, you know, never did I think at any moment that Apple could be the first $700 billion company, much less soon the first $1 trillion company. Sometimes you need to believe things to see it. And those are the 11 lessons of Steve Jobs. I hope you can apply them to your businesses and change the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you.